But travel back through the history of the Arab and Eastern world, and the picture looks completely different. Here, love was entirely dangerous, a force that could rewrite social hierarchies or tear a person apart. This graphic spells out the historical divide clearly. The East was writing poetry. They used epic verses to map the absolute extremes of human emotion. To actually understand this Eastern emotional worldview, we have to look at the 4 foundational pillars of their romantic literature. Each one tests human endurance in a wildly different way. If we skip these ancient narratives, we miss half the spectrum of human devotion. So we're going to examine these 4 stories to see how they built an entirely different architecture for love. Long before the rise of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula, poetry was the ultimate cultural currency, and into this world came Antar, a black knight completely rejected by his tribe. His race and status as a slave meant he was barred from polite society. When he sought to marry his cousin Abla, her family demanded an impossible dowry to humiliate him. As shown in this illustration, the price was 1,000 rare red camels, an enormous, near-mythic fortune designed to keep him away forever. Instead of accepting defeat, Antar used this massive barrier as a crucible. He rode out into endless tribal wars, securing the camels and composing legendary verses along the way, proving his martial and moral superiority to the very people who despised him. In this first pillar, love acts as a mechanism for extreme social rebellion. It provided a marginalized outcast the exact leverage he needed to force a prejudiced society to acknowledge his worth. Our second pillar deals with the danger of strict social rules. In traditional desert tribes, publicly declaring romantic love before a formal marriage agreement was a deep disgrace. It ruined a family's honor. A poet named Qais broke this rule. He broadcast his obsession for Layla in loud public verses. The immediate punishment was severe, permanent exile, and Layla's family absolutely refused his proposal. This total social denial triggered a psychological collapse. This diagram highlights the exact trajectory of his ruin: the isolated figure cast out into the wilderness, and the hand reaching directly into the fire. He became known simply as Majnun, the madman. He abandoned civilization entirely. Majnun spent his remaining years wandering the harsh desert landscape, living alongside wild animals, and eventually starving to death at Layla's grave. A moment of reflection. This narrative cemented the second pillar. Love is an overwhelming psychological force. If a society rigidly denies it an outlet, it will violently shatter the human mind. For the third pillar, we leave the harsh desert and enter the extreme wealth of Islamic Spain, Andalusia. Inside the royal courts of Seville, power and luxury were absolute. Consider King Al-Mu'tamid. When his wife Itimet felt nostalgic for her days playing in the mud, he ordered the creation of an extravagant, artificial mud. As this graphic breaks down, the king commanded his servants to mix pure musk, camphor, and expensive rose water to coat the palace courtyard. But the true test of their bond came later. The kingdom inevitably fell to rival empires. The royal couple was stripped of their titles, their wealth, and cast into a bleak, freezing dungeon. This introduces the concept of wafa, or unyielding loyalty. Atimet was offered a chance to leave and save herself. Instead, she chose to remain in a prison cell with the fallen king, enduring starvation rather than abandoning him. Eastern poetry uses this stark contrast to prove its third pillar. Anyone can be devoted in a palace. True romantic loyalty only begins when all material comforts are completely destroyed. Our final pillar takes us back in deep time to the cradle of civilization. We move from human history into the foundational mythology of ancient Mesopotamia. Here we find the story of the goddess Ishtar and the shepherd Tammuz. In this tradition, their bond transcended human romance and became a literal metaphysical law. We can see how this operates by looking at this diagram of the myth's cycle. On the left side, we see what happens when Tammuz descends into the underworld. His absence literally kills the natural world, causing winter, famine, and the cracking of the earth. It is only through Ishtar's fierce intervention, her perilous journey into the underworld to drag him back, that the earth revives. Looking at the right side of the diagram, we see her return brings the season of spring and the blooming of life. In this earliest tradition, love is the physical force that pulls the world through the seasons, dictating when crops grow and when the earth must rest. Where Western traditions often sought to organize love into a polite virtue, giving it a specific holiday and a specific saint, the East embraced its absolute, terrifying extremes. This literary tradition links the act of loving to a specific set of trials: the struggle for social worth, the collapse of the mind, the endurance of poverty, and the physical turning of the seasons. These specific narratives serve as a persistent anchor for Middle Eastern and Arab identity, recurring in modern literature and defining how the region navigates the complexities of devotion today. The greatest Eastern stories endure for a specific reason. They teach us that love is a primal, uncontainable force, dangerous, necessary, and completely immortal.